Tonight, we return to the ruins of Atlantis. The sea holds its secrets with a jealous grip. Beneath its rolling tides lie empires that no longer breathe, names swallowed by salt and silence. Yet there is one name that continues to echo: Atlantis. A city said to gleam brighter than gold, ruled by kings born of gods and felled by its own hubris. The waves know it, the wind remembers it, and tonight we follow that memory down into the deep. It begins not in water, but in fire, the fire of myth, imagination, and longing. Atlantis. A name that tastes like prophecy and burns like regret. Spoken first in the dialogues of Plato, it does not flicker in history as others do. It blazes into our collective memory through words wrapped in mystery. A philosopher speaks, but behind him stands an empire. He tells of a tale handed down through Egyptian priests, of an island beyond the pillars of Heracles, vast, rich, and ancient before ancient even had a name. Plato writes of Atlantis not as fantasy, but as caution. He sets the stage with Solon, the Athenian sage who traveled to the temples of Sais, and there, from lips dusty with age and wisdom, heard the story of a great cataclysm, a war, a flood, a fall. But where does storytelling end and memory begin? The waves roll over sand as if searching. Somewhere, below layers of shifting earth and fractured coral, bones sleep. Were they born from fiction or drowned by truth? Let the dust settle, the echoes rise, and the forgotten thrones speak once more. Far beyond Athens, where Plato's quill scratches across papyrus, other voices whisper. The Minoans, a flourishing civilization with palaces of labyrinthine design and a culture eerily reminiscent of Atlantis, are wiped from history by a violent volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern Santorini. Their end comes in ash and water. A historical fact, yes, but does it mirror Plato's tale too closely to ignore? Some believe the philosopher, inspired by the Minoan fall, reshapes history into metaphor. Others believe he preserves a fragment of a much older story, one far deeper, darker, and global. This is the crossroads where the myth begins to glow with danger. Atlantis is no ordinary fable. It lives too vividly, it persists too loudly, and in that persistence it gathers gravity. Fringe historians, spiritual seekers, and even military theorists have all dipped their hands into the water, hoping to lift truth like a pearl from its shell. Theosophists claim that Atlantis was the cradle of human evolution, psychic, spiritual, and technological, a place where thought itself could shape matter. They speak of levitating stones, energy crystals, flying machines, and the eventual decay of morality that turned miracle into madness. But Atlantis is not merely a city, it is a symbol. It is every golden age that collapsed, every arrogance punished, every knowledge lost. It is the haunting truth that progress is fragile, and that light, no matter how brilliant, can be swallowed whole. And the mystery remains. Why did Plato, a philosopher of logic and ethics, choose this tale as his final warning? Why cloak moral decline in the grandeur of an empire unknown to history? Skeptics argue that Plato never meant Atlantis to be taken literally, that it was a political parable, a mirror held to Athens' own rising pride. But others feel a deeper current. They argue Plato was not inventing, he was remembering. In our bones, we recognize Atlantis. We've dreamt of it long before we ever read of it. A place we've lost or been banished from, a paradise that crumbled not from attack, but from within. Historians continue to debate. Was it real? A misremembered Bronze Age catastrophe? A sunken island now shattered and hidden beneath shifting tectonic plates? Or something else? A memory passed through dreams and genes, whispering of a time when man walked with gods and forgot the cost. And so we begin this journey, not to prove or to disprove, but to listen, to follow the trail of echoes, myths, and stone, to step into the tide and walk backward through time. The bells beneath the sea are tolling, not in mourning, but in memory. Let them ring. Plato sits beneath the olive trees of academia, the Athenian sun soft upon his scroll. He is no mystic, no bard. He is a philosopher, methodical, precise, and unyielding in his pursuit of truth. Yet from his pen spills one of the most enduring legends of all time. Atlantis. He says he did not invent it, that the story is older than Greece itself, passed to him by Critias, passed to Critias by his grandfather, passed to the grandfather by Solon, the great lawmaker of Athens, and Solon, in turn, learned it not from the Aegean, but from the Nile. It is the Egyptian priests at the temple of Neith who hold the memory. They tell Solon of a colossal island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, a place with a mighty navy, vast fertile plains, and concentric rings of land and water surrounding a shining capital. 9,000 years before Solon's visit, they say, Atlantis waged war on the known world, and then, in a single day and night of misfortune, it was swallowed by the sea. A simple question arises like a flame in the dark. Why would Plato, the meticulous mind behind the Republic and the laws, write of such a tale if it were mere fiction? Was it a moral allegory, a political parable? Or did he, as some fringe thinkers claim, try to veil a dangerous truth inside a myth to escape censorship, or worse? This section of the tale contains one undeniable historical fact. Solon did indeed travel to Egypt. The accounts of his journey are well preserved. He studied their customs, spoke with their priests, and translated what he could. It is entirely plausible that he encountered ancient oral histories, older than any Greek text, which spoke of floods, sunken lands, and forgotten ages. But here, myth and history twist like double helixes. The timeline Plato offers is baffling. 9,000 years before Solon places Atlantis at 9,600 BCE, a date impossibly early for advanced civilization, according to mainstream archaeology. Agriculture had barely begun. Towns were rare. And yet here was a maritime superpower. For the fringe theorists and lost civilization seekers, this is not a mistake. It is the smoking gun. They argue that Plato, drawing from true but obscured knowledge, transmits the memory of a forgotten epoch, one erased not by time, but by cataclysm. This belief spirals into the theory of antediluvian civilizations, the idea that long before Egypt, Sumer, or India, there was another epoch, one in which human knowledge blossomed early, only to be destroyed by natural forces beyond our control or understanding. Plato, they claim, preserved a fragment of that hidden history. And yet, even if we entertain this, another question claws forward. Why did Plato choose to place the Atlanteans not as wise sages, but as enemies? They are not spiritual leaders. They are aggressors. Their army marches upon Athens and the world. They seek domination, not harmony. It is Athens, young, virtuous, and outnumbered, that resists and triumphs. Atlantis, swollen with pride and drowned in decadence, is punished by the gods and the earth alike. Here, the line between allegory and prophecy wavers. Some say Plato projected his fears of Athenian hubris into the past, a warning that greatness can rot from within. Others believe he was recalling a moral rhythm of the world, that when civilizations reach too far, they fall. The story also poses a powerful mystery. Why Egypt? Why does the cradle of Atlantis' memory rest not in Greece, but in the desert halls of the Nile? Esoteric traditions claim that Egypt was not the origin, but the refuge. That after Atlantis fell, its high priests, masters of astronomy, architecture, and soul science, fled eastward. That they brought their sacred knowledge to the Nile Valley and built the foundations of what would become ancient Egypt. To mainstream historians, this is nonsense. Egypt's history is well charted, and Atlantis is nowhere in its records. But believers point to the strange suddenness of Egyptian sophistication, the pyramids, the astronomy, the sacred geometry. Could these be fingerprints of an older source? The idea is tantalizing, perhaps too tantalizing. It is here that the myth of Atlantis becomes more than just a story. It becomes a symbol of origin. A whisper that what we call the beginning may, in truth, be a second chapter. Or a third. Plato's role, then, is not simply that of a writer. He becomes a vessel, a conduit for something older, deeper, more primal, a legend that refuses to die. Critics dismiss this as romanticism, but they cannot dismiss the persistence of the tale. Across the centuries, through empire and collapse, Atlantis refuses to fade. It draws seekers, madmen, dreamers, scientists, prophets, and poets alike. And it all begins here, with a philosopher, an Egyptian priest, and a story too strange to ignore. Beneath Plato's careful ink lies a fire. Whether that fire is truth or myth is up to us. But one thing is certain, It still burns. The city gleams like a dream trapped in glass, concentric rings of land and water, carved with surgical precision, shimmering beneath the sun. Bridges arch gracefully from one circle to the next, lined with towers clad in bronze and orichalcum, a metal now lost to the world, glowing like fire and honey. Aqueducts hum with running water, gardens spill over with fruit from distant lands, and in the center of it all, like a jewel in a divine crown, stands the temple of Poseidon, glittering with silver, pulsing with life. This is Atlantis as Plato described it. But this is also Atlantis, as visionaries and seekers have seen it, not in ruins but in radiance, not as a memory but as a warning. He tells of a place too perfect. Its architects master not only stone but order. Its citizens enjoy boundless wealth, fertile soil, gentle climate. Their navy stretches beyond the horizon. Their laws are etched in gold. Their gods walk among them, or so they believe. But the question rises like mist. Can any human civilization truly be this flawless? A historical fact anchors the fantasy. Plato's description of Atlantis includes technologies and aesthetics far beyond anything known in his time. Drainage systems, irrigation, large-scale construction, even something akin to geothermal energy beneath the city. He speaks of hot and cold springs used for bathing, sports grounds for citizen training, harbors brimming with trade from every corner of the world. These details beg a difficult question. Was Plato imagining what he wished to see, or remembering what others once were? Theosophists like Helena Blavatsky and later clairvoyants such as Edgar Cayce would seize on this image and amplify it into prophecy. They claimed that Atlantis was not only real, but once stood at the peak of a spiritual technological age, an empire guided by high priests and seers whose power came not from iron or fire, but from harmony, the manipulation of frequency, light, and thought. They speak of levitation through resonance, communication through vibration, healing through color and sound. The city itself becomes not just advanced, but alive, a conscious organism built to mirror cosmic laws. It sounds impossible, and perhaps it is, but here lies the heart of Atlantis's magnetism. It is not just a city, it is a mirror of what we could be. It is utopia teetering on the edge of ruin, a place where perfection becomes fragility, where too much light casts a fatal shadow. Modern scholars remain skeptical. They argue that Atlantis is a composite, a symbolic greatest hits of known civilizations. That Plato gathered what he admired from Egypt, Babylon, Persia, and imagined them as one dazzling whole. An ideal society to contrast with the flawed reality of Athens. But even the skeptics cannot explain how Atlantis, though unsourced, resonates across cultures. Take, for example, the ancient city of Nan-Madol in the Pacific, built atop a lagoon, composed of huge basalt columns arranged in grids and canals, or the precise urban planning of Mohenjo-Daro with plumbing systems centuries ahead of their time, or the underwater ruins off Yonaguni, Japan, a place of debate, natural formation or sunken city. None are Atlantis, yet all feel like echoes of it. This is the great mystery. Why does the vision of Atlantis feel familiar? Why do cultures who have never read Plato, or never heard of Greece, speak of shining cities swallowed by water, of ages of light before the flood? In the Hopi tradition, there is talk of a third world that fell due to corruption and greed. In Hindu cosmology, ancient golden ages end in cataclysmic cycles. Even the Bible speaks of a great flood wiping away civilizations. These stories are not siblings, they are scattered stars, and yet they form the same constellation. Could Atlantis be a psychic memory, a collective imprint of something humanity once knew or dreamed before waking into darkness? The mythic belief endures that we once lived in balance, that knowledge and spirit walked hand in hand, that Atlantis was the pinnacle of this union, and that its fall was not accidental, but earned. The story becomes less about where Atlantis was and more about what it was. A question emerges like a shimmer on still water. Is Atlantis behind us or ahead? Perhaps we are not remembering, but longing. Longing for a world where cities are built with beauty in mind, where leaders are guided by truth, where power does not corrupt but heals. Atlantis, then, is not just a legend, It is a test, because the more we imagine it, the more we must ask ourselves, could we build it again? And if we did, would we deserve to? The Atlantean kings are not merely men. They are descendants of Poseidon, god of the sea, born of divinity, ruling by sacred right. At least, this is how the myth begins. Plato tells us that when the gods divided the earth among themselves, Poseidon received the great island of Atlantis. There, amidst tall mountains and fertile valleys, he found a mortal woman, Plato, and fell in love. From their union came 5 sets of twin sons. These 10 kings would rule the 10 regions of Atlantis, each from a capital, but all bowing to the eldest, Atlas. It is from his name the island takes its own. This origin story is more than romantic embellishment. It frames Atlantis as a theocracy, a kingdom guided not just by laws but by lineage. Their power flows not from conquest, but from divine inheritance. The Atlantean bloodline is sacred, a fusion of God and man. This is our historical anchor. In nearly every ancient civilization, kingship is rooted in divinity. From Egypt's pharaohs to Japan's emperors, rulers claimed descent from gods to justify their power. Atlantis is no different. It too mirrors humanity's need to sanctify authority. But here, in this divine lineage, also lies the seed of its fall. For generations, the Atlanteans rule with balance. They are just. They are wise. They honor the gods and the earth. But with time, as the sacred blood is diluted, something begins to change. Plato writes, almost in lamentation, that the divine portion in them began to fade away. The kings become greedy. Their hearts swell with pride. They forget the old ways, the old oaths. And it is in this forgetting that the gods turn away. The mythic belief, drawn from esoteric traditions and fringe philosophies, is that Atlantis fell not because of an external war, but because of an internal betrayal. The Atlanteans began to manipulate life itself. They played with the essence of spirit and flesh, twisted nature to their will, and sought to become gods in truth, not merely name. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, spoke of Atlantean scientists who misused powerful crystals to alter genetics, prolong life, and dominate lesser beings. He warned of things created by man that should never have lived, echoes of hybrid experiments, soul splicing, and unnatural fusion. It sounds like science fiction. Perhaps it is, but the symbol remains potent. When rulers believe themselves untouchable, when power becomes identity, they no longer serve, they command. And Atlantis, for all its wonder, succumbs to this ancient flaw. One open mystery persists. Was the fall of Atlantis punishment or consequence? Some say Poseidon, enraged by his children's betrayal, called upon the earth itself to swallow them whole. Others say the Atlanteans, in their hubris, destabilized the natural forces they had once lived in harmony with, triggering earthquakes, floods, and firestorms through their own inventions. The line between divine wrath and natural disaster becomes thin. Here, myth and morality merge. Atlantis does not fall because it is weak, but because it is too powerful without wisdom. The 10 kings, once brothers, grow envious of each other. Their regions drift apart. Trade turns to competition. Temples fall into disuse. The crystal energies, once used for healing, become weapons. The city of light dims from within. And so the gods retreat. The stars go silent. The seas rise. The mountains shake. This tale echoes across time, from Babel to Babylon, from Rome to every fallen empire. It is always the same song. Greatness breeds pride, pride breeds blindness, and blindness births ruin. But Atlantis haunts us because it is not just a city, it is the best of us, the version of ourselves that had it all and lost it all. It leaves behind no names, no texts, no graves, only a question: what are we becoming? Are we walking the same path? Do we, like the Atlantean kings, believe we can inherit the divine without carrying its burden? The sea remembers, the gods perhaps still watch. And somewhere beneath the waves, in temples swallowed by coral and time, the descendants of Poseidon sleep, not as myth, but as warning. A parchment unfolds on a table of ancient cedar, its edges frayed by salt and time. Upon it is drawn a world both familiar and wrong, coastlines curving in places they should not, islands resting where no land exists today. This is the Piri Reis map, etched in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral who claims to have compiled it using older, now-lost sources. And here, at the bottom of the map, rests a riddle, a depiction of a southern continent with no ice, a coastline resembling modern Antarctica centuries before it was officially discovered and thousands of years before it was proven to be hidden beneath glaciers. This single map becomes a doorway for speculation. A historical artifact? Yes, but also perhaps a fragment from a time when the Earth looked different, when what is now submerged stood dry and living, when Atlantis may have been drawn not in imagination, but in ink. Historians explain the anomaly with caution. The Piri Reis map is fascinating, but its accuracy is debated. Some say it merely reflects the limits of 16th century cartography. Others argue that portions of the map do in fact reflect knowledge beyond its time, suggesting the existence of ancient seafaring civilizations that mapped the globe long before modern history allows. Fringe theorists step through this opening with confidence. They propose that remnants of Atlantean knowledge, preserved in secret, handed down through millennia, survived the cataclysm and eventually found their way into medieval and Renaissance maps. Not just the Piri Reis, but the Orontius Phineus and Boache maps also hint at pre-glacial shorelines in unknown lands. The pattern is uncanny. Is it coincidence or whisper? Some go further still, claiming that Atlantis was not a single island, but a sprawling maritime civilization, a culture that mapped the world, settled distant lands, and encoded its memory in myths and maps alike. According to this view, Atlantis may have spanned parts of the Atlantic, the Caribbean, and even touched what we now call Antarctica, the white desert whose silence hides more than ice. This leads us to an open debate that continues to polarize. Where was Atlantis? Plato places it beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the Straits of Gibraltar. Most take this to mean westward, into the Atlantic. Some point to the Azores, a group of islands with volcanic terrain and evidence of submerged plateaus. Others suggest the Caribbean, linking sunken structures off Bimini and Cuba with Atlantean ruins. Still others argue for the Rishat structure in Mauritania, the Eye of the Sahara, whose concentric rings mirror Plato's description with eerie precision. Each theory births its own followers, each location claims the throne, but none provide definitive proof. And this is what keeps the fire alive, the not knowing. The elusive sense that the truth remains just out of reach, like a name you almost remember. Atlantis refuses to be captured by GPS or carbon dating. It exists in a realm both physical and mythical, mapped by longing more than logic. One mythical belief, growing in popularity among modern mystics, is that Atlantis existed in multiple dimensions, that what we seek in this physical world once vibrated at a higher frequency, that its collapse was not only geological, but energetic, slipping Atlantis from our reality into another layer of existence, a city lost not only in space, but in vibration. While science scoffs, the poetry of this idea is undeniable. Imagine a world where cities floated between realms, where maps were not drawn with ink but with resonance, and where the ruins we seek lie not beneath oceans, but within veils of perception. A kingdom not drowned, but veiled. Still, the mystery remains sharp. Why do these old maps hint at lands that no longer exist? If Atlantis was real, and if it fell, might its cartographers have left behind clues, etched in skin-thin parchment, scattered in dusty libraries, misfiled in the margins of history? The image lingers. Explorers holding maps older than their language, pointing to a coastline that no longer rises from the sea. And above it, in faded Latin or Arabic, a single word. Atlantis. In this possibility lies both awe and sorrow. Because if the world was once fuller, richer, stranger, more connected, and we forgot, what else have we lost? The maps do not speak, but they do sing, faintly, in the folds of paper and the tilt of shorelines that shouldn't be there. And that song leads us still across oceans and into the past, looking for a home we may never find, but cannot stop remembering. Stone speaks in silence. Across the world, from South America to Southeast Asia, from the highlands of Scotland to the deserts of Egypt, massive stones stand, unmoved by time, unbent by empires, megaliths, pyramids, forgotten temples swallowed by vines. They rise like teeth from the earth, bearing no author, no signature, only the weight of impossible precision. And in their silence, they seem to whisper the same thing. We were here, before you, before memory. It is here, amid the global tapestry of ancient architecture, that Atlantis reemerges, not as a lost island, but as a lost origin. Not in a single location, but in a shared fingerprint. The historical fact is indisputable. Sites like Göbekli Tepe, built over 11,000 years ago, challenge everything we thought we knew about human civilization. Its carvings, astronomical alignments, and scale do not belong to hunter-gatherers. And yet, there it stands, older than the pyramids, older than agriculture, impossibly precise. Then there is Baalbek, in Lebanon, where stones weighing over 800 tons are stacked with an accuracy modern cranes would struggle to replicate. Or Sacsayhuaman, in Peru, where polygonal blocks fit together so tightly no blade can pass between them. These are not myths. They exist. We can touch them. But who built them? And why do they echo each other across oceans, across millennia? Fringe theorists suggest that these megalithic structures, despite cultural differences, share a common origin, the remnants of a once global civilization. They argue that this civilization, perhaps Atlantis itself, left behind sacred architecture as a legacy, or perhaps a warning. According to this belief, Atlantis was not merely a city that sank, it was the mother culture and her children scattered across the world before her fall. In their new homes, they remembered through stone what they could not preserve in language. Each site then becomes a temple of memory, not religious but ancestral. A great mystery fuels this theory, the global obsession with concentric design. Atlantis, as Plato described, was a city of rings, alternating water and land, spiraling outward from a sacred center. But similar patterns appear again and again in prehistory. The ancient city of Caral in Peru, the stone circles of Nabta Playa, even the Eye of the Sahara. And the architecture is not the only echo. Myths, too, recur. Tales of a golden age, of wise beings from the sea, of knowledge lost in a flood. The Dogon people of Mali speak of Nomo, amphibious gods who came from the stars and taught them astronomy long before telescopes existed. The Maya recorded stories of visitors who arrived after a great deluge, bringing calendars and counting systems. In India, the Mahabharata speaks of flying machines, energy weapons, and city-states lost beneath the sea. These are not isolated stories. They are threads of a tapestry we cannot quite see. Mainstream archaeology insists on independent development, that these similarities are coincidental, arising from shared human needs and creativity. But there are cracks in that theory, places where the precision, age, or knowledge embedded in the stones should not be possible. Even more puzzling, so many of these megalithic sites are aligned, not just to the stars, but to each other. Ley lines, though dismissed by science, are mapped by mystics as ancient highways of energy, connecting sacred sites across the planet. Is it myth or memory? One mythical belief is that Atlantis once sat at the center of this network, a spiritual axis around which Earth's energies flowed. After its fall, the currents were disrupted, the grid shattered, and humanity plunged into amnesia. Even now, some believe that the stones hum with dormant energy, and that rediscovering their purpose could awaken something long asleep. And the greatest mystery of all, why don't we know how they did it? Why is it that in age after age, when we look further back, the architecture becomes more advanced, not less? Why do the older stones weigh more, fit tighter, last longer? Shouldn't progress move in the opposite direction? Unless we are walking through a mirror. Unless history is not a line, but a circle. And Atlantis, rather than the beginning, is simply the last time we remembered. In the hush of these stones, we feel it, the presence of something unsaid. Atlantis may be drowned, but its voice is carved in granite, buried in desert sands, hidden in jungle roots. It is not the city we seek. It is the pattern it left behind, and the pattern is everywhere. The sky cracks open. Rain falls like knives. The earth groans beneath the weight of water. Rivers swell, devour villages, mountains crumble, oceans rise, entire civilizations are washed from the face of the earth in a single generation. This is not just the end of Atlantis, it is the end of an age. Across cultures, continents, and centuries, the same story is told, a great flood. The Hebrew Bible speaks of Noah, chosen by God to survive a world-cleansing deluge. In Mesopotamia, it is Utnapishtim. In India, Manu is warned by a fish to build a boat. In Mesoamerican mythology, the gods send water to destroy a disobedient people. And in Plato's account, Atlantis, corrupted by pride, abandoned by the gods, is destroyed by earthquakes and floods in a single day and night of misfortune. This convergence is not coincidence, it is pattern. A historical fact, nearly every ancient civilization has a flood myth. From Aboriginal Australians to Norse legends, the story recurs. The question is not whether the flood myth exists, but why it is so universal. Mainstream scholars suggest that flood stories were common, because early agricultural societies lived near rivers, prone to overflow. Natural disasters would be traumatic, and stories of divine punishment made sense as a way to explain the chaos. But this logic begins to bend under the weight of detail. Why would cultures on opposite sides of the earth, with no known contact, tell nearly the same tale? A chosen few warned, a great vessel, a drowned world, a rebirth. Some researchers point to the end of the last ice age, approximately 11,600 years ago. Sea levels rose dramatically as glaciers melted, vast coastlines vanished. If Atlantis did exist, and if it was a coastal or island civilization, it could very well have been swallowed in this exact window. Curiously, Plato's date for the fall of Atlantis, 9,000 years before Solon, places it precisely at the end of the Younger Dryas, a period of intense and sudden global climate change. Here, history and myth shake hands. Fringe thinkers argue that this deluge was not just environmental, but cosmological. That Earth was struck by a comet or asteroid, triggering global tsunamis, superstorms, and mass extinctions. Evidence of this theory, known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, includes strange platinum deposits, nanodiamonds, and scorched layers of Earth found across North America and beyond. If true, it means that a worldwide catastrophe, sudden, devastating, and long forgotten, may have wiped out entire civilizations before our own. And if Atlantis stood during this time, then it may have been one of many. One mythical belief suggests that this flood was not an accident, but a divine reset. That human consciousness had strayed too far, and the flood came not to punish, but to cleanse. The earth itself, some say, has rhythms, pulses of rebirth, and when we forget our place in the dance, the waters come. And here lies the haunting mystery. What came before the flood? Not the crude cave dwellers we once imagined, but perhaps something more. Something organized, artistic, advanced, not in our modern industrial sense, but in a way we no longer understand. A society that understood the stars not as dots of light, but as mirrors of the soul. That built not for expansion, but for resonance. That aligned cities with solstices, that buried meaning in myth and power in silence. Atlantis may not have been the only light extinguished. It may have been the last. The flood myths tell of survivors, those who heard the warning, those who remembered. They carried the seeds of forgotten greatness into the mountains, the deserts, the jungles. They became sages, builders, gods in the eyes of those they found. And their memory lingers not just in legend, but perhaps in our instinct. Our strange, aching sense that we are not the first to rise, that this is not our first dawn. Atlantis, then, is not just a sunken island. It is the shadow cast by a lost world, a whisper that beneath the calm surface of the sea and the fragile pages of history lies a storm still moving, a storm that once came and may come again. Beneath marble temples and behind locked doors, they keep the fire burning. Long after the waves have closed over Atlantis, long after its name has been buried in silence, the keepers of memory remain. They go by many names: the mystery schools, the guardians, the watchers, the adepts. Scattered through Egypt, Greece, India, and later Europe, they do not speak openly, but they remember. This is the world of sacred secrecy, where knowledge is not taught but earned, where truth is not written but whispered. The historical record is clear. Ancient Egypt had priesthoods that held immense influence over science, architecture, medicine, and cosmology. The Greeks, Pythagoras, Plato, and others, often trace their wisdom back to Egyptian initiations. Pythagoras spent decades in Egyptian temples. Plato revered these traditions and filtered their wisdom into allegory. The mysteries of Eleusis, the rites of Isis, and the Orphic initiations all suggest a stream of knowledge running beneath the river of history. But what were they guarding? Fringe researchers and mystical traditions alike believed that these secret orders preserved fragments of Atlantean wisdom. Not stories, not myths, technologies of the soul. They say Atlantis fell not only due to corruption, but due to the misuse of sacred science, knowledge too powerful for an unprepared heart, telepathy, vibration-based healing, crystals that channeled earth energies, harmonic architecture, even interdimensional travel. And when the flood came, those who survived scattered and encoded their wisdom in symbols, geometry, rituals, and story. The pyramid, then, is not a tomb, it is a transmitter. The labyrinth is not a maze, it is a map of the mind. The serpent, the eye, the spiral, not decoration but language. This is the mythical belief that stirs within countless esoteric teachings, that Atlantis did not truly vanish, it retreated. That the final adepts, sensing the fall, buried their knowledge in stone, encoded it in myth, and passed it along through generations of initiates who would never speak plainly, but always remember. It is said that the emerald tablets of Thoth, a mythical Atlantean priest-king, contain the essence of this wisdom. As above, so below, it reads. A phrase now cliché, but once sacred. A mirror of cosmos and self, heaven and earth, Atlantis and the world that followed. Mystery schools taught this correspondence. That man is not separate from the divine, but a reflection of it. That within the human is hidden a light, the same light that once shone over Atlantis before pride dimmed it. A great mystery lingers. Why hide such knowledge? Why not share it, preserve it openly? Because they say light given too soon blinds, and Atlantis is the proof. In esoteric tradition, true knowledge is dangerous, not because it wounds, but because it empowers. In the wrong hands, it becomes domination. In the right hands, liberation. So they waited. From the shadows of Egyptian sanctuaries to the underground libraries of Alexandria, from the monastic orders of Tibet to the alchemists of Europe, these keepers formed an invisible chain across time. Each link a guardian, each vow a silent promise. Never again. Even today, many believe these schools endure, not as dusty cults or secret societies of wealth, but as lineages of spirit. Quiet teachers, anonymous sages. They do not need Atlantis to rise from the ocean. It rises instead through understanding. This is the heart of the myth. Atlantis is not just a place to be found. It is a state to be remembered. The fire it lit was never meant to stay above the waves. It was meant to be passed hand to hand, heart to heart, until mankind was ready. And perhaps we are. One open debate remains. Is modern humanity now on the brink of rediscovering what was hidden? With quantum physics echoing ancient teachings, with science and spirituality inching closer, are we standing once more at the gates of forgotten knowledge? Or are we simply repeating the same dance, once again wielding power faster than we can evolve soul? Atlantis may be gone, but the guardians are not. They walk unseen. They listen to dreams. They wait not for ships, but for awakenings. And if you are very quiet, deep within the labyrinth of your own being, you may still hear the echo of a voice older than words, whispering, "Remember what you are." Wind carries the voices of the survivors. Not all were lost when Atlantis fell. Some saw the signs, in the stars, in the tides, in the trembling of the earth. They fled in time. And though their island home disappeared beneath the waves, their memory did not. They became the exiles. This belief, a myth to some, a sacred truth to others, tells of the few who escaped the cataclysm. High priests, builders, astronomers, sages. They journeyed across the oceans in great vessels, guided by starlight and inner knowing. And wherever they landed, they planted seeds, not just of crops but of civilization. Their presence is felt in the sudden rise of advanced knowledge in cultures once thought isolated. In Egypt's pyramids, in Sumer's mathematics, in Mesoamerica's calendars, in the megaliths of Europe. Historians offer caution, There is no direct evidence linking these civilizations. Their developments, while striking, are believed to be independently achieved. But the timeline is curious, and the symbolism recurring. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, is said to have arrived from the east after a great flood, bringing knowledge, calendars, and a code of ethics. In Peru, Viracocha rises from the waters to teach civilization. Both are described as bearded, pale-skinned figures, strange in cultures where such features were unknown. Coincidence or echo? In Egypt, Thoth emerges not merely as a deity, but as a bringer of writing, medicine, astronomy, all traits ascribed to the Atlantean sages. And in India, the rishis, or seers, are said to have passed down Shruti, divine knowledge heard from beyond, echoing Atlantis' legacy of vibration and spiritual science. These stories do not point to Atlantis directly, but they orbit it, like moons around a drowned star. One historical fact lends weight to the myth. There is evidence of sudden cultural flowering after periods of apparent devastation. The Neolithic Revolution, the shift from nomadic life to agriculture, writing, and city building, seems to occur too quickly, too simultaneously across different regions. Why? Some believe it was not spontaneous, but remembered, that the survivors of Atlantis carried the blueprint of civilization in their minds and blood, and when they reached safe lands, they rebuilt, not identically, not openly, but in fragments, disguised in local forms, embedded in temples, myths, and math. A mythical belief expands this further. The survivors were not just wise, they were chosen, guardians of a sacred charge. They knew that the time was not yet right for humanity to reclaim the full power of Atlantis. So they taught in symbols, parables, rituals. They built stone temples aligned with the stars. They created priesthoods to carry the light forward. But over generations, their bloodlines faded, their teachings distorted. What was once truth became legend, then superstition. Yet even in distortion, a whisper remains. The mystery that haunts historians and seekers alike is this: why do so many civilizations begin with a story of arrival, of culture bringers, wisdom carriers, sky people, or sea kings? Why do the earliest myths speak not of evolution from savagery, but of inheritance? Could it be that we did not rise alone, but were lifted? And if so, who were the lifters? The image of Atlantis in exile becomes something more than migration. It becomes initiation. The idea that after the flood, humanity was reborn, not in ignorance, but in amnesia. That we are the children of a world we once knew, but forgot. In this vision, every ancient temple is a memory palace, every myth a map, every god a ghost of something real, now half remembered. Atlantis, then, does not rise from the sea. It rises in us as we reclaim the pieces scattered by our ancestors, as we gather the stone and fire they left behind, and perhaps as we prepare for their return. Because if the exiles scattered, if they ceded new lands, then their descendants still walk among us, not with crowns or glowing eyes, but with dreams they can't explain, with memories of water and light, with a longing for something lost, a homeland never found, a voice just beneath waking. We've been here before. The silence before destruction is always sacred. Atlantis, at the height of its glory, pulses like a living heart. Temples hum with crystal resonance. Its 10 kings rule in perfect symmetry, at least on the surface. But deep within, something shifts. Something ancient begins to fray. For generations, the Atlanteans have held harmony between spirit and science. They have walked with the gods, channeled light into matter, and healed with energy instead of steel. They've bent the elements, shaped stone with sound, and levitated mass with thought. But progress without reverence turns inward and begins to rot. The divine lineage, once pure and guarded, grows diluted by intermarriage, conquest, and ego. The sacred becomes utility. The temples are still lit, but the flame flickers not from devotion, but from habit. And in the heart of the city, the great crystal begins to dim. Plato tells us little of Atlantis' technology, but esoteric sources speak volumes. Edgar Cayce, in Trance, describes massive power crystals housed in pyramidal structures, called the Firestone or Tuaoi stone. These were not religious artifacts, but energy cores said to control weather, gravity, and communication across vast distances. With them, the Atlanteans could travel, heal, and build. But eventually, these tools become weapons. This is the mythical belief that Atlantis did not merely fall, it imploded. Its citizens, drunk on power, began to manipulate genetics, spirit, and matter. They sought to create hybrid beings, not only to labor, but to serve their egos. They fractured the veil between dimensions. They opened what should have remained closed. The priests warned, the sages begged, but the kings did not listen. Some say they believed themselves gods. Others say they became gods, but hollow, twisted, echoing the divine without carrying its light. One historical fact adds eerie weight. In nearly every ancient civilization, there is a moment when artistic style suddenly shifts, from the harmonious and symbolic to the grotesque and monstrous. In Egypt and Mesoamerica, even in ancient India, beings with animal heads, hybrid forms, terrifying deities emerge. Were these simply metaphor or memory? A recurring image in esoteric circles is that of the genetic temples, underground labs where the Atlanteans attempted to alter human evolution, lengthen life, even transfer consciousness. But without spiritual discipline, their creations turned wild. Some say these are the origin of myths, the centaur, the mermaid, the minotaur, echoes of real experiments now buried in symbolism. And so the gods turn away. Whether literal or archetypal, divine forces, which once guided Atlantis, withdraw. The earth begins to respond, volcanoes awaken, earthquakes ripple across the concentric city, and the sea, silent until now, begins to move. Some say the end comes in one night. Others say it is a slow unraveling, a decay of moral gravity that causes the physical world to collapse in tandem. One mystery still divides seekers. Was Atlantis destroyed by higher powers, as punishment, or by its own hand? Plato hints that it was divine judgment, but other traditions suggest the Atlanteans simply lost control of their own creation. That the great crystal, once attuned to the Earth's resonance, shattered, unleashing energy that fractured the grid, shifted tectonic plates, and sent walls of water racing across the world. One mythical belief goes further. Atlantis was not destroyed, it was sealed. That to prevent further damage to Earth or other realms, the city was locked away in a higher dimension. That its survivors scattered, and the city itself became myth to protect what still sleeps beneath. And yet, the resonance remains. People today still dream of cities with glowing towers, still draw maps of lands no longer visible, still speak of a fall they cannot explain, as if the trauma of Atlantis is carved into the very bones of human memory. We carry it, that ache, that guilt, that echo, not because we lived it, but because we inherited its consequence. Atlantis teaches the oldest lesson. When greatness exceeds wisdom, the center cannot hold. We see it again and again. Empires rise, forget, and fall. But Atlantis is not just the first. It is the archetype, the wound, the original betrayal of soul for power, and perhaps the original warning. Because the Atlanteans did not set out to destroy themselves. They sought greatness, beauty, light. They built paradise. But they forgot the one truth even gods must obey. That power without balance becomes curse. And in forgetting that, they vanished beneath the waves. It is said that at the heart of Atlantis stood a living crystal, vast, luminous, and humming with a tone not heard by ears but by the soul. This was not ornament, it was not decoration. It was the source. The crystal heart of Atlantis, often referred to in esoteric circles as the Twa-Oi stone, was no ordinary mineral. It pulsed with life. It was tuned to the frequencies of the earth, sky, and stars. It balanced energies, magnified thought, and provided limitless clean energy to the city, all in perfect harmony with nature. It was, in essence, conscious technology. Historical fact. Many ancient cultures revered crystals, not merely as jewelry or wealth, but as spiritual tools. Quartz was used by Egyptians for healing. Mesoamerican shamans saw obsidian as a portal. The Vedas mention stones that store vibration. There's no Atlantean crystal in the archaeological record, but the veneration of crystal across disconnected civilizations is real, and fringe theories build upon that with abandon. Some researchers claim that Atlantean crystals could focus solar and earth energies into usable power, enabling wireless energy transmission, weather manipulation, even levitation. Others believe the crystals amplified psychic abilities, allowing the Atlanteans to communicate telepathically, to store and transfer knowledge, and even to open gates between dimensions. It sounds fantastical. But even today, crystals are used in modern technology, in watches, radios, and computers. Quartz crystal, for instance, vibrates at extremely stable frequencies, making it invaluable in precision instruments. So, what if ancient civilizations knew more than we assume? Not in terms of electronics, but resonance. The mythical belief is that the crystal heart of Atlantis was attuned to the consciousness of the people. As long as they lived in balance, honoring soul over ego, harmony over dominance, the crystal thrived. It resonated with the frequency of love, of light, of truth. But when corruption seeped into the Atlantean mind, when greed, pride, and control took root, the frequency shifted. The crystal dimmed. Some say it cracked, others say it reversed, pulling energy inward and unleashing a wave of destruction that tore the city apart. It was not just a technological failure, it was a spiritual collapse. One open mystery endures. Could such a power source, capable of drawing energy from Earth and cosmos alike, truly have existed? In the 20th century, Nikola Tesla proposed wireless energy transmission and claimed he could draw limitless energy from the ether. He died discredited, mysterious, but his notes contain echoes, strange diagrams, symbols, even mentions of vibrational tuning. Is it coincidence that many of Tesla's ideas mirror what mystics claim about Atlantean technology? Or are these ideas older than we think, resurfacing again, as if memory itself is trying to be reborn? Some believe that remnants of the crystal heart still exist, buried beneath the ocean, dormant, waiting for the world to evolve. Others say it's shattered into pieces, scattered across the globe, and that those attuned to spirit may find them and awaken something forgotten. And then there are those who say it's inside us now. That humanity, after the fall, absorbed what could not be preserved in stone, and that the light of Atlantis now flickers in the soul of every seeker. The crystal heart becomes metaphor, myth, mystery. But perhaps that's the point. Atlantis has always been all three. What is undeniable is the pull. Across cultures, generations, and disciplines, the idea of a radiant source of ancient energy, hidden, lost, misunderstood, continues to inspire. Whether it is called Tuaoi, the philosopher's stone, or the Merkaba, it is the same dream, that there was once a purity, a center of power aligned with love, and that we lost it. The question is not whether the crystal existed. It is whether we are ready to remember what it stood for. Because the crystal did not fail, we did. And perhaps, just perhaps, its song still lingers, waiting for ears brave enough to hear. There are wars written in history, and there are wars forgotten by time. And then, there are wars that never belonged to time at all. As Atlantis ascended in power, some say it did not stand alone. That across the blue plains of the primordial world, there was another kingdom, one older, wiser, and far more secretive, Lemuria. Unlike the advanced technology and fire-driven ambition of Atlantis, Lemuria was said to be attuned to the earth in ways lost to modern imagination, a continent of telepaths, nature symbionts, and crystal harmonics. It stretched across what we now call the Pacific, from parts of India to the western shores of the Americas. The mythic belief persists in Eastern traditions, the Tamil legends of Kumari Kandam, the Polynesian stories of Sunken Empire, the Japanese myths of Mu. They describe a place that valued spiritual balance over conquest, heart over hierarchy. And according to fringe esoteric traditions, Atlantis and Lemuria once coexisted, twin flames of Earth's early greatness, but their ideologies began to diverge. Atlantis, drawn toward control and experimentation, turned outward. Lemuria, rooted in deep communion with Earth, turned inward. One sought stars, the other sought spirit. And so began what some call the War of the Suns. This is no war of borders. This is a war of frequencies, of thought forms, energy matrices, and cosmological alignment. According to mystics, the conflict unfolded not only in the physical realm, but also in the astral, the dream space, the dimensions beneath waking. Some believe the Atlanteans, driven by a hunger to dominate, began to weaponize crystal technologies. that they opened rifts in space, manipulated weather, and tampered with the fabric of consciousness itself. Lemuria resisted, not with armies, but with psychic defense, energetic shielding, and resonance harmonics. And then the balance tipped. The Earth, strained between two massive civilizations pulling its energy in opposite directions, began to fracture. Volcanoes erupted, magnetic fields destabilized, the poles began to shift. Some say this culminated in a celestial impact, a comet or asteroid that Earth itself invited as a final corrective force. One historical curiosity lies in this theory's timing. The proposed fall of Atlantis and Lemuria aligns closely with the Younger Dryas event, when a sudden and dramatic climate shift altered the course of human history. Some researchers believe this period was triggered by a cosmic collision, perhaps with remnants of a disintegrated comet. Could this catastrophe have been the result of a war not between nations, but between civilizations of belief? The Atlanteans, in their drive to master the cosmos, may have opened more than they could understand. The Lemurians, in their effort to preserve Earth's harmony, may have sacrificed themselves to prevent greater destruction, and both fell. Some esoteric texts claim Lemuria sank slowly beneath the Pacific, its inhabitants choosing to return to the inner Earth, to Agartha, rather than reincarnate in a fractured world. Atlantis, in contrast, fell violently, a city shattered by the very forces it sought to control. The mystery deepens with recurring myths of a star-born conflict. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of wars between gods, Enlil and Enki, lords of heaven and earth. Hindu Vedas tell of sky battles and celestial weapons, Vimanas and Astra. The Book of Enoch references watchers descending to earth, corrupting humanity. What if these are not separate tales? What if they are different windows into the same primal memory? A memory of Earth as a stage not just for human struggle, but for cosmic drama. One mythical belief holds that Atlantis was seeded not solely by terrestrial evolution, but by extraterrestrial intervention. Beings from Sirius, Pleiades, or Orion, bringing knowledge not just of Earth, but of stars. Lemuria, too, was said to be influenced, not by outside entities, but by Earth's own consciousness, its spirit. Atlantis, then, becomes a symbol of external mastery, Lemuria of inner awakening, and their clash, not evil versus good, but imbalance versus harmony. A lesson we still have not learned, because even now, humanity stands on the brink of a similar crossroads, exploring AI, gene editing, quantum energy, yet still fractured within, divided by power and pride. The war between Atlantis and Lemuria is no longer myth. It is metaphor for our age, and perhaps prophecy. The question remains, must we fall again? Must we repeat the war? Or can we this time choose synthesis? To remember what both civilizations forgot, that power without love corrupts, and that love without power crumbles. Atlantis rose with fire, Lemuria fell with grace, and in their ashes we are born, dreamers haunted by memories we do not understand. The tide recedes, but the shadow remains. Some say Atlantis is gone, a myth submerged beneath miles of salt water and sand. But others whisper, it never left. Not in the way we think, not as a city of towers or temples, but as a presence, a pulse, a quiet influence moving through the undercurrent of human history. This belief, held by mystics, occultists, and even some within fringe science, suggests that Atlantis survives in shadow, not in ruins, but in reincarnation. Not as land, but as legacy. In this view, Atlantis was not a singular location. It was a consciousness grid, a matrix of knowledge and energy encoded into Earth and humanity alike. When the city fell, the grid shattered, but not entirely. Pieces endured, some within stone, others within souls. The idea of Atlantean reincarnates runs deep in theosophical teachings. Helena Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, and others claimed that many living humans carry memories of Atlantis in their subtle bodies, that their sudden affinities for sacred geometry, healing, ancient languages, or stars are not random, but remnants. This idea is not merely symbolic. Some report dreams of a city they've never read about, spirals of light, crystal towers, circular temples. Others feel deep emotions when exposed to specific symbols, the trident, the spiral, the golden sun. and some believe the Atlanteans did more than reincarnate. They reformed. According to this mythical belief, when Atlantis fell, its surviving adepts, those who retained spiritual clarity, did not disappear. They regrouped, often in secrecy, forming the early blueprints of what we now call secret societies: the Druids, the Essens, the Rosicrucians, the Knights Templar, the Freemasons. These were not merely political or philosophical groups. They were custodians, guardians of fragmented wisdom, waiting for a world wise enough to receive what Atlantis lost. Many esoteric teachings describe hidden cities: Shambhala, Agartha, Telos, places of light beneath mountains or within inner earth, where Atlantean consciousness continues to thrive. These cities are not accessible by maps, but by vibration. Not seen with eyes, but felt, in meditation, in dream, in moments when silence opens. One historical pattern feeds this belief: the sudden rise of certain inventions, movements, or philosophies that seem out of time, as though pulled from an unseen memory. The Renaissance. Sacred architecture, quantum leaps in science that align with metaphysical ideas once dismissed. Is it merely genius, or are we unknowingly remembering? A profound mystery lingers here. Why do so many of the world's elite institutions use Atlantean symbols? The all-seeing eye, the stepped pyramid, the twin pillars, the sun disk. These symbols appear in coats of arms, currency, architecture, across governments, religions, corporations. Are they echoes or fingerprints? Some believe Atlantis, far from being forgotten, guides the modern world, not in conspiracy, but in consciousness, that we are repeating its rise and must soon choose whether we also repeat its fall. Others take a darker view, suggesting that a distorted version of Atlantean power lives on through control systems, surveillance, and technocratic elites seeking to resurrect the outer shell of Atlantis without its soul. But not all shadows are evil. Some protect, some wait, some carry the torch across centuries so that when the time is right, humanity may rebuild from within. In this view, Atlantis is already being reborn, not through excavation, but through awakening. Each person who remembers, each artist who dreams it, each child who speaks of places they've never seen, each seeker drawn to forgotten truths. These are the scattered embers of a once great fire. And though scattered, they still burn. The mythic belief then transforms. Atlantis is not gone, but hidden in plain sight. In you, in the silent longing for harmony, in the ache to live in a world where science and spirit are no longer divided, where knowledge is sacred again, where we do not dominate nature, but listen to it. A world that knows what it used to be. So look not only beneath the ocean, look beneath your dreams, your instincts, your oldest memories, and listen. Because Atlantis has never truly sunk. The wind over Antarctica is a whisper, sharp, relentless, ancient. Beneath its endless veil of white, secrets sleep in frozen silence. Among researchers, one word is rarely spoken aloud: Atlantis. Yet the rumors persist. Satellite images from the 20th century showed geometric anomalies beneath the ice, rectangular formations, grid-like patterns, dark lines that vanish and reappear as if something stirs beneath the glacial tomb. Whistleblowers from military expeditions claim to have seen impossible structures buried under miles of ice: obsidian walls, metallic doors, unnatural warmth. Is it all fantasy, or is Antarctica the final tomb of Atlantis? This belief, while rejected by mainstream science, has taken root in fringe circles and alternative history communities. It posits that the lost continent of Atlantis may not have sunk beneath the Atlantic Ocean, but been reclaimed by ice. That during the last pole shift or cataclysm, the Earth's crust repositioned, sending what was once a temperate and lush landmass to the bottom of the globe. One historical fact gives pause. The Piri Reis map created in 1513 shows what appears to be the Antarctic coastline, free of ice. If the map was indeed based on older sources, then someone, somehow, mapped Antarctica before its glaciation. Modern science confirms that the last time parts of the Antarctic coast were ice-free may have been over 6,000 to 12,000 years ago, curiously aligned with the proposed fall of Atlantis. Coincidence or glimpse? Some believe the Richat structure, the Azores, or the Caribbean to be Atlantis, but others, including certain Nazi expeditions during World War II, believed it lay beneath the South Pole. Operation High Jump, a 1946-47 U.S. naval mission led by Admiral Richard Byrd, is often cited in this theory. While officially a scientific survey, Byrd later spoke cryptically of a new enemy capable of flying pole to pole. His words, though vague, have been absorbed into Atlantean lore. The mythical belief that Antarctica hides Atlantis includes claims of crystalline cities locked under the ice, ancient machines still pulsing in stasis, and even slumbering beings, not dead, but dreaming. It is said that a veil was placed over the region, making it nearly impossible for humans to truly penetrate without being invited. But why Antarctica? Why would Atlantis choose to remain buried there? Because they say it is the perfect prison and sanctuary. Far from prying eyes, guarded by nature itself, protected by cold and inaccessibility, a continent forbidden by treaty, governed by no single nation, shrouded in military secrecy. Perhaps not coincidence, but design. One enduring mystery is the sudden prohibition on exploration. While scientific research stations operate under strict protocols, no one may freely explore the interior. Private access is impossible. No fly zones exist. Why? For what? Some theorists suggest that beneath the ice lie ruins not of primitive dwellings, but of something vastly beyond. Corridors lined with unknown alloys, glyphs etched in glowing stone, chambers that respond to thought. And here, Atlantis begins to blur with other myths, the idea of extraterrestrial influence. That Atlantis was a hybrid colony, part earthborn, part star-seeded. That the final remnants of its technology were too powerful, too sacred, or too dangerous to remain above ground. So they were buried, and the earth, like a patient mother, placed a blanket of ice over her sleeping child. But some believe the ice is melting, not just because of climate, but because the cycle is ending. That the grid is awakening. That seismic anomalies and atmospheric disturbances are not random, but signals. That Atlantis is not dead, merely dormant, and that a time is coming when what lies below will rise. Not as a city, not as a war machine, but as a revelation. And what will we find? Not just ruins, but ourselves, our origin, our potential, our warning. For if the stories are true, and if Atlantis is indeed entombed beneath Antarctica, then the moment it is revealed will not merely be a historical shock, it will be a spiritual threshold, one we may not be ready for. And perhaps that is why the veil remains, not to protect the truth from us, but to protect us from the truth. Because beneath the ice, the city still breathes, silent, watching, waiting. Tonight, we return to the ruins of Atlantis. But the ruins are not only stone, nor the sea its only tomb. Atlantis lives, not in proof, but in presence. Beneath the weight of myth and mystery, beyond the arguments of archaeologists or the dreams of mystics, a deeper truth pulses, soft as a memory, sharp as a scar. Atlantis is not lost. It is remembered. Across these 15,000 words we have walked a spiral, through temples and cataclysms, through fire and ice, through stars and shadows, each layer peeling back not just a city, but a mirror. Atlantis was never simply about a location, it was always about us. The brilliant rise, the slow forgetting, the hunger for power, the blindness to consequence, the collapse, not just of stone, but of soul. And yet, even in its fall, Atlantis became a seed, scattered in symbols, in stories, in stone, carried by exiles, whispered by priests, hidden in dreams. The crystal heart still pulses, not beneath the ocean, but in the chests of those who long for a world guided by truth, not conquest. For a civilization not built on domination, but resonance, harmony, light. The war with Lemuria, the guardians in shadow, the whispers beneath Antarctic ice. These are not merely tales, they are questions, echoing through time, testing our memory. What have we become? And more urgently, what are we becoming now? For we are once again on the edge, of knowledge expanding faster than wisdom, of power surging without balance, of forgetting the cost of forgetting. Atlantis warns us, not with fear, but with grace. It calls not to despair, but to remember. That we are not separate from the earth, but her breath, that we are not fallen, but asleep, that perhaps, just perhaps, we are returning, not to rebuild the towers or awaken lost machines, but to restore what made Atlantis sacred in the first place, a union of spirit and matter, of stars and soil, of knowing and honoring. So if you find yourself drawn to these myths, if your heart stirs at concentric rings, ancient maps, or silent stones, you are not foolish. You are remembering. And as the ice melts, as the tide shifts, as silence gives way to song, may the lost throne rise again, not in the sea, but in you. Let the dust settle, let the echoes rise, let the forgotten throne speak once more.